Well, friends, I want to read to you from Matthew 19, which I mentioned today, in verses 4 through 6, where Jesus is asked a question about adultery, and he goes back to Genesis to talk to the men of his day about the permanence of marriage, about God's intention for marriage. And he says this: "Have you not read that the one who made them at the beginning made them male and female, complementary, a gender and identity and sexuality and covenant all get connected in this passage in Genesis. And he said, for this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. The two shall become one flesh." Very interesting. In the ancient world, family was your most primary loyalty and obligation. And so it was typical not to start a new family, but to adopt a potential partner into your existing family, to build onto your family estate. But Jesus talks about leaving and cleaving, it quotes in Genesis, a new reality. The two shall become one, not just the joining of bodies, the physical part of that, but the joining of souls. And so he's making the case that there is a spiritual dimension to the covenants and the connections that a man and woman have in marriage. It's inherently spiritual. And that contrasts with some other religions that think of our desires as being something that gets in the way of our advanced spiritual development. It's this way in Hinduism with the ashrams, the successive ashrams that highly spiritual people go through. It's this way in most forms of Buddhism as well, where the advanced spiritual person sets aside desire, gets in the way of his spiritual development. Here, spirituality and sexuality and desire are integrated. And so Jesus celebrates this part of nature's design as well as warning about it. The two are no longer two, but one. Therefore, what God has joined, let no one separate. The early chapters of Genesis are partly about separation, distinction. They're partly about God separating the light from the darkness and the sea from the land and the heavens from the earth, but they're also about this special kind of joining. And this is seen as healthy and proper part of the design of human beings and the design of the whole world. There are, of course, dangers in attraction, in unlimited desire. It can be hard to master our thoughts. It can be hard to discipline our urges and our connections. And that's why our current culture we live in pretty much celebrates hooking up and connecting with people whenever folks get the opportunity. So with fear of that, even in the ancient world, which had a similar attitude, some Christian men decided to opt out of society as a whole so they wouldn't be tempted, and they went out to live alone in the desert. They were solitaries. Eventually they formed single-sex communities under the influence of people like St. Anthony. But part of the reason that they isolated themselves or formed single-sex communities, they were kind of afraid of the temptation that would come from the opposite sex. Interestingly, those solitaries found out that even though they were alone in the desert, it didn't clean up their minds, which were able to generate images that were just as tempting as real life encounters. So it's fascinating that Jesus did not take the route of forsaking marriage, but instead enhancing our view of it, of what it does for us in uniting our passions, our attractions, with the capacity we have to experience divine love, unconditional love, and to share that in promises. Let's take a moment and pray. Lord, it's hard to just simply control our thoughts by deciding to do so. The things we don't want to think about seem to be the things that we end up thinking about. So instead, Lord, help us to have healthy mental patterns that focus on love and service, and keep us away from unholy desires and images that lead to various kinds of unfaithfulness to you or to others with whom we have made promises. Amen.